The cold was a physical thing, a presence that settled deep in my bones and refused to leave. It wasn't the dramatic, biting cold of a blizzard, but the damp, persistent chill of a Pacific Northwest autumn turning toward winter. It seeped through the thin metal of my car door, through the worn fabric of my jacket, and into the very marrow of me. My world had shrunk to the dimensions of a 2008 sedan. The driver's seat my bed, the passenger seat my closet, the glove compartment my pantry. It was a small, cold kingdom, and I was its lonely king. My days had a rhythm, a routine built for survival and invisibility. Before the sun rose, I would use the restroom at the all-night gas station, splashing icy water on my face to chase away the ghosts of sleep. Then, I would drive the half-mile to the Sea Sprite Motel, parking in the employee section at the far back, my car indistinguishable from the others that belonged to the housekeeping and maintenance staff. I was one of them. For 8 hours a day, I pushed a cart down long, drafty corridors, changing sheets, scrubbing tubs, and erasing the transient lives of strangers. The work was anonymous and exhausting, and I was grateful for it. The Sea Sprite was a study in beige and brown, a place of last resorts and long-term stays for people with few other options. It stood in the shadow of its neighbor, the Vance Astoria. The Astoria wasn't just a hotel, it was a landmark. A tower of gleaming glass and warm, polished stone that rose into the perpetually gray sky like a promise of a different world. Its light spilled across the shared parking lot, a golden tide that stopped just short of our cracked asphalt. I spent a lot of my downtime watching it, watching the ballet of valets and the quiet confidence of its guests. And I watched him, Mr. Arthur Vance. He owned the Astoria, built it from the ground up, they said. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, with hair the color of distinguished silver and a presence that was both commanding and intensely quiet. He didn't carry himself like a man who owned the sky. He moved with a sort of grounded stillness, a calm that seemed to emanate from him. Sometimes, late in the evening, I'd see him walking the perimeter of his property, his hands in the pockets of a dark, well-tailored coat. He wasn't inspecting, not really. He was communing with it. He'd pause and look up at the building, and the expression on his face was one of quiet pride, but also of profound responsibility. I knew it was foolish, this distant, one-sided observation. I was a ghost haunting the edges of his perfect world. A 24-year-old man living in his car, cleaning toilets for a living, watching a billionaire like a starstruck teenager. But it was the only beautiful thing in my life. The sight of him, steady and solid, was a kind of anchor in the turbulent sea of my own circumstances. I had a small, folded linen napkin, thick and cream-colored with a subtle VA embroidered in one corner. I'd found it in a bin of laundry sent to our commercial cleaners by mistake. I kept it in my glove compartment, a stupid, secret talisman. It felt like holding a piece of warmth, a piece of his world. The night it all changed, the cold had found new teeth. A storm had blown in from the coast, bringing with it a driving, icy rain that turned the world into a slick, black mirror. My thin blanket was useless against the damp that crept in through the window seals. Sleep was impossible. Every shiver was a violent tremor that shook the whole car. I was huddled in the driver's seat, trying to fold myself into a small enough ball to conserve heat, when a pair of headlights cut through the darkness, stopping a few yards from my bumper. My heart hammered against my ribs. Security. The motel manager had warned us about sleeping in our cars on the property. It was bad for business, he'd said. I squeezed my eyes shut, feigning sleep, my mind racing. I'd be fired. I'd have to find a new place to park, a new job. The fragile structure of my life was about to collapse. A car door opened and closed with a solid, expensive thud. Heavy, measured footsteps crunched on the wet gravel, coming closer. Closer. A soft, hesitant knock sounded on my driver's side window. Not the sharp rap of a security guard, but something gentler. I held my breath, pretending to be lost to the world. The knock came again, a little more insistent this time. I knew I couldn't ignore it forever. Slowly, painfully, I uncurled my stiff limbs and sat up, rubbing my eyes as if just woken from a deep sleep. Through the rain-streaked glass, a figure stood, haloed by the headlights of his car. It was him, Arthur Vance. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored coat, but a heavy, dark jacket that looked both practical and impossibly luxurious. His silver hair was damp, plastered to his forehead by the rain. His face, illuminated by the dim glow of my dashboard, was etched with concern. Not pity, not disgust, just a quiet, genuine concern. I fumbled with the window crank, my fingers numb and clumsy. The window lowered with a squeal of protest, letting in a blast of cold, wet air. He leaned down slightly, his gaze meeting mine. His eyes were a deep, clear gray, and they held an unnerving perceptiveness. He seemed to see everything in a single glance: the threadbare blanket, the empty water bottle on the passenger seat, the deep weariness in my bones. "It's a cold night to be out," he said. His voice was just as I'd imagined it from a distance, low and calm, a steady baritone that seemed to absorb the frantic energy of the storm. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple statement of fact. I could only nod, my throat tight. "Yes, Mr. Vance." A small, thoughtful frown touched his lips. He knew who I was. Of course he did. He probably knew the name of every employee at the shabby motel next door. It felt like the kind of detail a man like him wouldn't overlook. He looked from me to my car, then back again. The silence stretched, filled only by the drumming of the rain on the roof. I braced myself for the lecture, the order to move along, the call to the police. Instead, he straightened up and gestured with his head toward the gleaming tower behind him. "I have plenty of empty rooms," he said, his voice even. "Warm ones." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the offer. It didn't make sense. People like him didn't see people like me. We were part of the scenery, the invisible machinery that kept their worlds running smoothly. I can't afford a room at the Astoria, sir." He met my gaze again, and this time there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Impatience, perhaps, but not with me. It was an impatience with the state of things, with a world where a young man had to sleep in his car in a freezing rainstorm. He took a small step closer, his presence a shield against the wind. "I'm not running a charity, and you're not a ghost haunting my property line," he said, the words precise and clear. "You're a neighbor in need of a warm place to sleep. Tonight, you are my guest. It's as simple as that." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "My guest, not my ghost." The words hung in the air between us, a lifeline thrown into my cold, dark world. My guest. It was an invitation, an acknowledgement of my existence. He saw me. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt seen. A knot of emotion, cold and hard as a river stone, began to dissolve in my chest. I didn't have the strength to argue, to protest, to cling to my ragged pride. I just nodded, a single, jerky movement. "Okay," I whispered, the word barely audible over the storm. A hint of a smile, small and reassuring, touched his lips. "Good. Park your car in my private garage. Level P1, Space 1. The gate will be open. I'll meet you at the staff entrance." He didn't wait for another reply. He simply turned and walked back to his car, moving with that same unhurried, deliberate grace. He trusted I would follow. As his car pulled away, I sat there for a moment, the sound of the rain my only companion. The warmth from my own breath fogged the window, temporarily obscuring the golden light of the Astoria. My guest, not my ghost. The phrase echoed in my mind, a quiet revolution. With trembling hands, I turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered to life, a familiar, rattling cough. For the first time in months, I wasn't just driving to survive. I was driving toward warmth. The private garage was like entering another world. It was clean, brightly lit, and warm. The air smelled of concrete and expensive cars. I parked my rattling sedan in the reserved space next to a sleek, black vehicle that probably cost more than every house I'd ever lived in combined. I felt like an imposter, a fraud who had slipped through a crack in the universe. I grabbed my worn backpack, the sum of my worldly possessions, and got out, my worn sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Mr. Vance was waiting for me by a discreet metal door, just as he'd said. He held it open, and I stepped inside, into a quiet, carpeted hallway. The sudden warmth was a shock, a physical blow that made my skin tingle and my head spin. He led me to an elevator, and we rode up in silence. I was intensely aware of him standing beside me, the scent of rain and clean, expensive wool clinging to his coat. He was taller than I'd realized, solid and broad-shouldered. The weight of his presence was immense, yet it wasn't oppressive. It was grounding. The room he led me to wasn't a standard guest room. It was a small suite on one of the staff floors, simply but comfortably furnished. A real bed with a thick duvet, a small desk, a clean, private bathroom. It was paradise. The shower has hot water. Plenty of it, he said, his voice gentle. He placed a keycard on the desk. This will get you in and out of the building and operate the elevator. There are towels in the bathroom. I'll have some food sent up. I stood in the middle of the room, clutching my backpack, feeling utterly overwhelmed. Mr. Vance. I thank you. I don't know what to say. He turned at the door, his hand on the handle. He looked at me, really looked at me, and his expression was serious. My name is Arthur, and you don't have to say anything. Just get some rest. Leo, he knew my name. The realization hit me with surprising force. He had known my name out in the parking lot. He had taken the time to learn it. The small detail felt more significant than the warm room, more important than the offer of food. He closed the door softly behind him, leaving me alone in the silence. I stood there for a long time, listening to the muffled sound of the storm outside. For the first time in a very long time, I was safe. And I was not invisible. The hot water was a miracle. It sluiced the grime and the cold from my skin, and I stood under the spray until my fingers and toes pruned, letting the warmth soak deep into my muscles. When I emerged, wrapped in a towel so thick and soft it felt like a hug, there was a tray on the desk. A simple meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and green beans, with a glass of milk. It was the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. I ate every bite, then crawled into the bed. The sheets were crisp and cool, the duvet a comforting weight. I fell asleep instantly, a deep, dreamless sleep, the kind I hadn't known in years. The next morning, I woke to the unfamiliar sensation of being truly rested. Sunlight, pale and watery, filtered through the window. For a moment, I was disoriented, my mind still expecting the cramped confines of my car. Then it all came rushing back. Arthur Vance. The warm room. The kindness. A wave of anxiety washed over me. What now? Was I supposed to just leave? Was this a one-night reprieve before being cast back out into the cold? I dressed in my cleanest set of worn clothes and was trying to build up the courage to face the day when a soft knock came at the door. It was him. He was dressed for work in a perfectly tailored gray suit, but he held two simple ceramic mugs in his hands. He looked as solid and reassuring as he had the night before. I thought you might like some coffee, he said, his voice calm. He held one of the mugs out to me. Thank you, I said, my voice hoarse. I took the mug, the heat of it a welcome shock against my cold hands. It smelled rich and dark. He leaned against the doorframe, sipping from his own mug, his presence filling the small space without crowding it. I have a proposition for you, Leo. I tensed, my mind immediately jumping to the worst conclusions. My gratitude soured into suspicion. There was always a catch. A proposition? He seemed to read my thoughts, his expression softening with something that looked like understanding. Nothing untoward, he said quickly, his voice firm but gentle. I happen to have a project. My hotel archives, old blueprints, photographs, correspondence, are in a state of disarray. They're in a storeroom in the basement. It needs to be organized, cataloged. It's tedious work, but it's important to me. I need someone meticulous and patient. I'm prepared to offer you a temporary contract, a fair wage, and you can continue to use this room until you've saved enough to find a place of your own. I stared at him, dumbfounded. He wasn't offering a handout. He was offering a job. A dignified, respectable job that had nothing to do with scrubbing toilets. He was giving me a way to earn my keep, to maintain my pride. The offer was so thoughtful, so carefully constructed to preserve my agency, that it left me breathless. Why? I finally managed to ask. Why are you doing this for me? Arthur took another sip of his coffee, his gaze thoughtful. He looked out the window for a moment before meeting my eyes again. Let's just say I know what it's like to need a fresh start. And I'm a good judge of character. He straightened up, his tone shifting to something more businesslike, though the warmth remained. The job is yours if you want it. No pressure. Think it over. My office is on the top floor. Let me know your decision by the end of the day. He didn't press for an answer. He simply gave me the space to make my own choice. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, the coffee mug warming my hands, my mind reeling. A fresh start. The words echoed in the quiet room. It was more than I had dared to hope for. For the first time in a very long time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a possibility. I spent the next few hours in a state of quiet contemplation. I called the Sea Sprite and quit my job. The manager barely seemed to notice I was gone. Then, I showered again, put on my best, which wasn't saying much, worn jeans and a faded but clean Henley, and took the elevator to the top floor. My reflection in the polished brass doors was that of a stranger, a young man who looked thin and tired, but whose eyes held a flicker of something new. Hope. Arthur's office was less an office and more a sanctuary. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling window with a breathtaking view of the city and the bay beyond. The other walls were lined with books. The desk was a large, clean expanse of dark wood, and the air smelled of old paper, leather, and fresh coffee. He was standing by the window when I came in, but he turned to face me, a question in his eyes. "I'll take the job," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I want the job." "Thank you, Mr. Arthur." The small, reassuring smile I was beginning to recognize appeared on his face. "I'm glad to hear it, Leo. Welcome to the Astoria." The archive was a large, climate-controlled room in the sub-basement, filled with flat file cabinets, rolling shelves, and dozens of dusty cardboard boxes. It was a forgotten history of the hotel, a treasure trove of the past. Arthur walked me through it, his hands moving over the old blueprints with a kind of reverence. He showed me the initial architectural sketches, the faded photographs of the construction, the leather-bound guest ledgers from the early years. "This place is my life's work," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Every beam, every pane of glass. It matters to me. I need someone who understands that." His gray eyes met mine, and there was a vulnerability in them that surprised me. He wasn't just giving me a job. He was entrusting me with a piece of himself. "I understand," I said, and I meant it. I understood what it was to have something that was wholly yours, even if my own kingdom had been a broken-down car. The days that followed settled into a new, quiet rhythm. I would spend my hours in the silent, peaceful solitude of the archive, carefully sorting, cleaning, and cataloging. The work was methodical and satisfying. I was creating order out of chaos, piecing together a story from fragments of the past. I learned about the hotel, about the vision and determination it took to build it. And in doing so, I learned about him. Arthur would often come down at the end of the day, sometimes with coffee, sometimes just to see my progress. He never hovered or micromanaged. He would stand quietly, looking at what I had accomplished, a small nod of approval his only comment. We would talk, at first about the archives, but gradually, the conversations drifted to other things. Books, music, the city. I found myself watching him, just as I had from a distance, but now it was different. I saw the fine lines around his eyes when he smiled. I saw the way his large, capable hands could be surprisingly gentle as he handled a fragile, old photograph. I saw the deep-seated integrity in the way he spoke to his employees, always with respect, always by name. He was a man of quiet habits and deep-seated calm. But I started to notice the small things. The slight hesitation before he spoke, as if weighing each word for its truth and its kindness. The way his gaze would linger on me for a fraction of a second too long when he thought I wasn't looking. There was a loneliness in him that mirrored my own, a quiet yearning hidden beneath the layers of success and composure. One afternoon, I was on a stepladder, reaching for a box on a high shelf, when my foot slipped. I lost my balance, a startled cry escaping my lips as I flailed. Before I could fall, a strong hand gripped my arm, steadying me. Another hand came to rest firmly on the small of my back. It was Arthur. He had moved so quickly and silently, I hadn't even heard him enter the room. "Careful," he said, his voice a low rumble so close to my ear it sent a shiver down my spine. I stood frozen on the ladder, my heart pounding. His hand was warm and solid against my back, a point of heat that seemed to burn right through my shirt. I could feel the strength in his grip, the controlled power. He wasn't just holding me, he was anchoring me. The moment stretched, suspended in the dusty, quiet air of the archive. His hand didn't move. "I'm okay." I finally managed to breathe, my voice thin. "Thank you." Slowly, reluctantly, he withdrew his hand. But I could still feel the phantom pressure of it against my skin. "Perhaps we should invest in a sturdier ladder," he said, his tone even, but his eyes held a new intensity when they met mine. He cleared his throat and took a step back, putting a careful distance between us. The space he created felt charged, electric. That small, functional touch became a turning point. The unspoken tension between us, which had been a low hum in the background, grew louder, more insistent. We were both acutely aware of it, and we both pretended not to be. Our conversations became more careful, our proximity more deliberate. A brush of shoulders as we passed in the narrow aisles of the archive felt like a shout. A shared glance over a box of old letters felt like a confession. I spent hours analyzing every interaction, every word, every gesture. When he brought me coffee, was it just a kind gesture, or was it an excuse to see me? When he asked about my day, was it polite small talk, or did he genuinely care? I was terrified of misreading the signals, of projecting my own burgeoning feelings onto his quiet kindness. The power imbalance was always there, a silent third party in the room. He was my employer, my benefactor. I was the boy he'd rescued from the cold. The thought was a constant, sobering check on my runaway emotions. One evening, he invited me to have dinner with him in his private penthouse suite. It wasn't a command, but a gentle invitation. The hotel restaurant is excellent, but I prefer the quiet, he explained, as if needing to justify the offer. My heart hammered with a mixture of excitement and dread. This felt different. This felt personal. The penthouse was stunning, a masterpiece of understated luxury with panoramic views of the city lights. But it was also clearly a home. There were books stacked on side tables, a well-worn leather armchair by the fireplace, and framed photographs on the mantelpiece. Not of celebrities or dignitaries, but of landscapes, stark and beautiful. Dinner was simple, catered from the hotel kitchen, but we ate at a small table by the window, the city glittering like a carpet of jewels below us. The conversation was easy, comfortable. He asked me about my life before I came to the city, and for the first time, I told someone. I spoke of my small town, my fractured family, the string of bad luck and bad decisions that had led me to living in my car. I didn't tell him everything, but I told him enough. He listened without judgment, his steady, gray eyes full of a quiet empathy that made me feel safe. After dinner, we sat in front of the fireplace, a comfortable silence settling between us. The only sound was the soft crackle of the flames. Arthur swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his expression thoughtful. "Leo," he began, his voice low. "I want to be clear about something." He set his glass down and turned to face me fully. "Your position here, your room, they are not contingent on anything other than the work you do. The work is excellent, by the way. You have a remarkable eye for detail." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "I know. Thank you. I want to be sure you know it." He continued, his gaze intense. I worry that given our circumstances, you might feel a sense of obligation. That my presence might feel like pressure." He paused, searching for the right words. "I am aware of my position, of my age. I would never want you to feel that you couldn't say no to me. About anything." It was a moment of profound vulnerability. He was the one with all the power, yet he was the one expressing concern for my comfort, for my autonomy. He was handing me back the power, making it explicit that I was in control. The careful wall I had built around my heart began to crumble. This man wasn't just kind. He was deeply, fundamentally good. "I don't feel pressured, Arthur," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I feel seen." A flicker of relief crossed his face, so quick I might have missed it. He held my gaze for a long moment, a silent conversation passing between us. In his eyes, I saw it then, clear as day. The same yearning that lived in my own chest. The same quiet hope. The same cautious fear. We were two lonely men, standing on opposite sides of a vast canyon of circumstance, and in that moment, we were both wondering if it was possible to build a bridge. The tension between us didn't dissipate after that night, it transformed. It was no longer a source of anxiety, but a shimmering, hopeful thing. The unspoken was now mutually acknowledged, even if it remained unspoken. We moved around it, and around each other, with a new, delicate choreography. The archive became our sanctuary, a quiet, protected space where the rules of the outside world seemed to fade away. The tipping point came, as it often does, not in a grand, dramatic fashion, but in a small, public moment. The hotel was hosting a large charity gala, a glittering affair that filled the grand ballroom with the city's elite. Arthur had been preoccupied with the preparations for weeks. I had remained in my quiet haven in the basement, a world away from the glamour and chaos. Late in the evening of the gala, I was working, catching up on some cataloging, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Arthur. Minor crisis. Grand ballroom. Service corridor. Need your eye. It was an unusual request, and a jolt of alarm went through me. I took the service elevator up, my work clothes feeling grimy and out of place as the sounds of music and laughter grew louder. I found him in the bustling corridor behind the ballroom. He was in a tuxedo, looking impossibly handsome and completely at ease, yet there was a line of tension in his jaw. He was speaking quietly with a frantic-looking event planner. The digital displays are malfunctioning, Arthur said to me, his voice low and calm amidst the chaos. The donor recognition loop is frozen on a test pattern. The tech team is stumped. He looked at me. You're good with details, with finding the broken link in the chain. I was hoping you might see something they're missing. It was a vote of confidence, a public one. He was bringing me, the archivist from the basement, into the heart of his most important event of the year. I spent the next 20 minutes tracing cables and checking settings on a laptop, ignoring the curious glances of the catering staff. Arthur stood nearby, a silent, supportive presence, deflecting questions from his staff and creating a small bubble of calm for me to work in. I found the problem. A single line of corrupted code in the presentation file, a misplaced semicolon. It was the kind of tiny error that could bring a whole system down. I fixed it, and the screens flickered to life, the names of the donors scrolling smoothly in elegant gold script. The event planner sagged with relief. Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and warm. I knew you could do it, he said, his voice filled with a quiet pride that made my chest ache. Thank you, Leo. Just then, a man in a tuxedo, another guest, approached Arthur. He was older, with a florid face and a condescending smile. He glanced at me, taking in my simple clothes, then looked back at Arthur. Vance, he said, his voice booming. Good to see you. Putting the boy to work, are we? It's good for them to earn their keep. He winked, a greasy, conspiratorial gesture. The implication was ugly and clear. He saw me as Arthur's kept boy, a charity case, a plaything. A cold fury washed over me. I felt my face flush, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. But before I could say a word, Arthur's hand tightened on my shoulder. His posture didn't change, but a chill entered his voice, a hard edge of steel beneath the calm. Leo is my colleague, Arthur said, his tone leaving no room for argument. And he just saved this entire event from a very embarrassing technical failure. I'd say we're the ones who are lucky to have him. He met the man's gaze, his gray eyes like chips of granite. Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to thank him properly. Without another word, he guided me away, his hand still firmly on my shoulder, a protective, possessive gesture. He led me away from the noise and the lights, into a small, quiet office. He closed the door, and the sounds of the gala faded to a distant murmur. He let go of my shoulder and turned to face me, his expression a mixture of anger and regret. I am so sorry, Leo. That man is an idiot. You should not have been subjected to that. It's not your fault, I said, my voice shaking slightly. The man's words had stung, but Arthur's defense of me, that had undone me completely. He hadn't just defended my honor. He had claimed me as a colleague, as an equal. It is my fault, he insisted, his voice tight. It's my world. A world full of small-minded, cynical people. I brought you into it. He took a step closer, his hands finding his pockets as if to keep from reaching for me. The space between us was electric, humming with everything that had been left unsaid for weeks. Arthur, I began, but I didn't know what to say. What do you want, Leo? He asked, the question soft but intense. It was the same question from my anxious daydreams, but hearing it now, in this charged moment, it felt like the most important question in the world. He wasn't asking about my job or my future. He was asking about us. He was asking for the truth. His gaze was locked on mine, open and vulnerable. He was giving me the floor, making it clear that the next move was mine. All the fear of rejection, all the anxiety about our differences, it all seemed to fade away, replaced by a simple, overwhelming certainty. I take a breath. It feels like the first real one I've taken in years. The air in the small office is warm, scented with his clean, familiar smell. In this moment, the vast chasm between our lives, the wealth, the age, the power, it all collapses into this single, shared space. There is only him, and there is only me. And there is the truth. You, I say. The word is quiet, but it lands in the silence with the weight of a stone. I want you, it's a confession. A terrifying, liberating confession. I watch his face, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, bracing for the retreat, the polite rejection, the gentle reminder of our places. But Arthur doesn't retreat. He doesn't even flinch. A slow, profound relief washes over his features, smoothing the lines of tension around his eyes and mouth. The stillness he carries within him seems to deepen, to settle. He closes the small distance between us in a single, deliberate step. His hands come up, not to touch me, but to frame my face, his palms hovering just inches from my skin, radiating a warmth I can feel without contact. I have wanted to hear you say that for longer than you can imagine, he says, his voice a low, rough whisper. The sound of it, so full of raw, undisguised emotion, unravels the last of my restraint. I was afraid, I admit, my own voice thick. Of all this, of what people would think, of what you would think, I think, he says, his gaze dropping to my lips for a fraction of a second before returning to my eyes. That what other people think has never mattered less. His hands finally make contact, his thumbs tracing the line of my jaw with an impossibly gentle pressure. His touch is not tentative, it is certain. It is a question and an answer all at once. Is this okay, Leo? He's still asking, still giving me the power, still making sure. The sheer, breathtaking decency of him steals my breath. I lean into his touch, a silent surrender, and nod. Yes, that's all the confirmation he needs. He lowers his head, slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I don't. I meet him halfway. The first touch of his lips is soft, hesitant, a question. It's not a kiss of passion, not yet. It's a kiss of discovery, of recognition. It tastes of relief and a quiet, profound rightness. It feels like coming home to a place I've never been before. I lift my hands and rest them on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart beneath the fine fabric of his tuxedo shirt. He deepens the kiss, and a soft sigh escapes my lips, a sound of pure contentment. His arms slide around me, one hand settling in the small of my back, the other tangling gently in the hair at the nape of my neck, pulling me closer until there is no space left between us. We stand there for a long time, lost in the quiet miracle of it. The kiss is unhurried, a long, slow conversation without words. It speaks of lonely nights and quiet observations, of cautious hopes and unspoken fears. When we finally break apart, it's only for air. He rests his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. His breath is warm against my cheek. Leo, he whispers, his voice thick with an emotion I can't quite name. It's more than desire. It's a kind of reverence. Arthur, I breathe back, my hands still flat against his chest, anchoring myself to him, to this moment. The world outside this small room, with its music and its judgment, has ceased to exist. There is only the steady warmth of him, the solid ground he represents, the foundation that has been settling quietly and unseen under my feet for weeks has finally found its place. A long-locked door inside me has just been opened, not with a key, but with a gentle, patient hand. The next morning, I woke up in Arthur's bed. The sheets were an impossible thread count, soft as a cloud against my skin. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, painting the room in shades of gold and rose. Arthur was already awake, sitting in the leather armchair by the window, a mug of coffee in his hands. He was dressed in a simple pair of gray trousers and a soft, dark sweater, and he was just watching me. A wave of panic, cold and sharp, washed over me. The reality of the situation came crashing down. I was in the bed of one of the city's wealthiest, most powerful men. The boy from the car, in the billionaire's bed. The ugly words of the man at the gala echoed in my mind. What had I done? The gulf between our worlds, which had seemed to vanish last night, now felt like an impassable canyon. Arthur must have seen the fear in my eyes. He set his coffee down and rose, moving to the edge of the bed. He didn't touch me, but sat a respectful distance away, his posture open and non-threatening. "Good morning," he said, his voice soft. He waited, letting me find my footing. "Morning," I managed, my voice a croak. I pulled the sheet up a little higher, a useless, protective gesture. "Leo, look at me," he said gently. I forced myself to meet his gaze. His eyes were clear, steady, and filled with a deep, unwavering kindness. There was no trace of regret or second thoughts. Nothing has to change if you don't want it to. What happened last night, it was important to me. But your comfort, your safety, that's more important. If this was a mistake, you can tell me. There will be no consequences. Your job is secure. Your room is yours for as long as you need it. Nothing will change. He was doing it again. He was sensing my fear, my insecurity about the power imbalance, and he was addressing it head-on, with honesty and respect. He was dismantling my panic with his quiet, steady reassurance. He wasn't dismissing my feelings. He was validating them, and then offering me a clear, safe way out. And in doing so, he made me want to stay more than ever. It wasn't a mistake, I said, the words coming out stronger than I expected. I'm just processing. It's a lot to take in. A small, relieved smile touched his lips. I understand. He stood up. I'm going to make some coffee. The kitchen is through there. The shower is, well, you can probably find it. Take your time. There's no rush. He gave me space, the most valuable gift he could offer in that moment. I watched him go, the knot of anxiety in my stomach slowly unclenching. He wasn't trying to own me or control me. He was trying to build a partnership with me. Later, we sat at the kitchen island, drinking coffee in a comfortable silence. The penthouse, which had seemed so intimidating, now felt like a home. His home. It was filled with him, his quiet taste, his love of books, his appreciation for the beauty of the city spread out below us. We should establish some ground rules, he said, his tone practical but not cold. To make this work, to make you feel secure. I listened, my respect for him growing with every word. At the hotel, in public spaces, we are colleagues, he stated. I am your boss, you are my archivist. It's important for your professional standing that we maintain that boundary. No one can ever have cause to say you're receiving special treatment. I nodded. It made perfect sense. It protected me. This, he said, gesturing around the penthouse, is our space. This is where we can be us. And your room downstairs remains yours. Your private space. I will never enter it without your express invitation. You need a place that is entirely your own, where you can retreat if you need to. He had thought of everything. He was actively working to rebalance the scales, to ensure I never felt trapped or dependent. He was using his resources not to control me, but to empower me. And your finances, he continued, tackling the most difficult subject with a calm directness. Your salary is your own. You will continue to save for your own apartment. I will not supplement it. When you're ready to move out, I will, if you allow me, help you find a good, safe place. But it will be your name on the lease. Your independence is non-negotiable. Tears pricked my eyes. He wasn't just offering me a relationship. He was offering me a future I could build for myself, with him by my side as a partner, not a patron. Okay, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Okay, Arthur. That all sounds good. Really good. He reached across the island and took my hand, his fingers lacing through mine. His touch was warm and firm. Is there anything else you need? Any other boundary that would make you feel more comfortable? I thought for a moment, then shook my head. He had anticipated all my fears. No. You've thought of everything. I squeezed his hand. Thank you. There's no need to thank me for treating you with the respect you deserve, Leo, he said simply. And in that moment, I knew I was falling in love with him. Our first public test came a week later. We were having lunch in the hotel's casual bistro, a working lunch to discuss the archive project, adhering to the boundaries we'd set. It felt both strange and right, sitting across from him in a professional capacity, the memory of his kiss, of his arms around me, a secret warmth in my chest. The general manager of the hotel, a brisk, efficient woman named Maria, stopped by our table. She smiled warmly at Arthur, then her gaze fell on me. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I'd seen her around, but we'd never spoken. I was just the boy in the basement. Arthur, she said. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Maria, he replied smoothly. You know Leo, our archivist, of course, she said, her tone polite but cool. Her eyes scanned me, a quick, assessing glance. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. I knew what she was thinking. I knew what everyone who saw us together would probably think. Leo was just outlining his proposal for digitizing the original blueprints. Arthur continued, his voice perfectly even. He drew me into the conversation, positioning me as a valued expert. It's a brilliant plan. It will preserve them for generations and make them accessible for research. He has my full support. He was talking to her, but he was speaking to me. He was reinforcing my value, my legitimacy, in front of one of his key employees. Maria's expression shifted slightly. A flicker of professional respect entered her eyes. "That's an excellent initiative," she said, her tone now genuinely interested. "I'd be very interested to see the proposal when it's ready. I'll have it on your desk by the end of the week," I said, finding my voice. After she left, a comfortable silence fell between us. Arthur took a sip of his water, his expression unreadable. But under the table, his foot gently brushed against mine, a small, secret signal of solidarity. We had navigated the moment together. We were a team. 2 months later, I found an apartment. It was a small one-bedroom in a clean, quiet building a few miles from the hotel. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The first month's rent and security deposit, paid from the money I had carefully saved, was the most satisfying check I had ever written. Arthur came with me to sign the lease. He stood quietly in the background, letting me handle the transaction, a silent, supportive presence. When the landlord handed me the keys, I felt a surge of pride so fierce it almost buckled my knees. I had done it. I was standing on my own 2 feet. That night, we celebrated not with a fancy dinner, but by ordering pizza and sitting on the floor of my empty apartment. There was no furniture yet, just a few boxes I had moved from my room at the hotel. We ate straight from the box, laughing as we dripped sauce on the cardboard. "To new beginnings," Arthur said, raising his can of soda in a toast. "To new beginnings," I echoed, my heart full. He looked around the empty room, a soft smile on his face. "It's a good space. It feels like you, it feels like home," I said, and the truth of the words surprised me. It wasn't the walls or the roof that made it feel that way. It was him, here with me, making this empty space feel full of promise. Our relationship settled into a new, beautiful rhythm. We kept our professional lives separate, as we'd agreed. At the hotel, I was Leo, the diligent archivist whose digitization project was earning quiet praise. He was Mr. Vance, the respected owner. But in the evenings, and on weekends, we were just Arthur and Leo. Sometimes we would stay at his penthouse, enjoying the luxury and the stunning views. But more and more often, we found ourselves at my small apartment. He seemed to like it there. He said it was peaceful. We would cook together in my tiny kitchen, navigating the small space in a comfortable dance. We'd watch old movies, curled up on the second-hand sofa I'd bought. We'd talk for hours, about everything and nothing. It was in these quiet, domestic moments that I felt the true depth of our connection. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the disparity in our wealth. It was about the simple, profound intimacy of sharing a life. It was about the way he always made the coffee in the morning because he knew I was slow to wake up. It was about the way I learned to recognize the subtle shift in his expression that meant he was tired or stressed. It was about building a shared world, one quiet moment at a time. One Saturday morning, I woke up early in my own bed. Arthur was still asleep beside me, his silver hair tousled against the pillow. One of his arms was draped protectively over my waist. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the room. I lay there, perfectly still, just watching him breathe. I thought back to that cold, rainy night, to the desperate, invisible boy I had been, huddled in his car. It felt like a lifetime ago. It felt like a different person. That boy had been so focused on survival that he had forgotten how to live. He had been so afraid of being a burden that he had almost refused the hand that was offered to him. Arthur's gift to me wasn't the room, or the job, or the financial security. His gift was that he had seen me. Not as a project, not as a charity case, not as a ghost. He had seen me as a person worthy of respect, of kindness, of love. He hadn't saved me. He had created a safe space for me to save myself. He had used his power not to diminish me, but to help me find my own. The difference in our ages, in our bank accounts, it hadn't disappeared. It was still a fact of our lives, but it was no longer a barrier. It was just context. It was part of the story of how we found each other, but it didn't define the story of who we were together. We were not the billionaire and the boy he rescued. We were Arthur and Leo, 2 men who had found in each other a quiet, steady harbor from the storms of the world. He stirred beside me, his eyes fluttering open. He blinked a few times, then a slow, warm smile spread across his face as he saw me watching him. It was a smile of pure, unguarded affection, a smile I knew was reserved just for me. "You're staring," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "I'm looking," I corrected him softly. "There's a difference," he shifted, pulling me closer until my head was resting on his chest. I could feel the steady, reassuring rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my ear. It was the sound of my home, the sound of my future. "What do you see?" he asked, his lips brushing against my hair. I closed my eyes, a feeling of profound peace settling over me. The fear was gone. The insecurity was gone. All that was left was a quiet, unshakable certainty. I was no longer a ghost, haunting the edges of a life I could never have. I was here. I was seen. I was loved. "Everything," I whispered. "I see everything." Share your thoughts in the comments. What moment stayed with you? If the story resonated, a like helps others find it. Subscribe for more slow burn male/male love stories told with warmth and care.